Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Third Space Podcast, episode number 58, Fear in the Headlights. This is the second episode in a row where I've thought of a really good title after we already recorded the episode, and I didn't drop it in the episode. And I know that it would have been funny and Daniel would have laughed, but Home is Where the Hearth Is, I forgot about it. Fear in the Headlights, messed that one up. Well, sorry. At least it gets to be the podcast title. Anyway, in this episode, Daniel and I talk a little bit about the fact that his job is coming to an end, not permanently, but because it's the start of summer and he's a teacher, so now he gets his annual break from work, and so he's happy about that. We talk about some of the annoyances of adult life and complain about the DMV, but then we quickly move into our main topic of discussion for this episode, which is fear, the emotion, phenomenon of fear, the behavior of fear. We discuss the difference between fear, anxiety, and panic, how much they overlap, and where they're different. We talk about some anecdotes, personal anecdotes about when we experience fear, whether it's rational or irrational. We talk about some specific phobias, and generally just muse on what it means to be afraid of something. So I thought it was a very interesting discussion. I found fear to be a pretty interesting topic, and I hope you will as well. So with that, we will let the episode begin. Enjoy.
Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Bennett,
Daniel.
I've walked out of school today, my last day of work, and into this podcast. So I'm experiencing, or I should be anyway, experiencing that blissful, euphoric, like if there's a best time of year, like you could say this is it. And if you could concentrate that time into like a 2-hour span, this would be it, statistically, in terms of I've got the most holiday or time off ahead of me. And that's nice.
Congratulations. It must
Thank
be nice
you.
to have such an easy job where you don't have to work for months at a time. Like during the year, you get to leave at like 3 or something. You don't even work the whole day. And then you get all those holidays and then the whole summer. Man.
That's why I took the job. It's just how easy it is and how much time I get off, That's
Must
just
be
why
nice.
I do it.
Well, congrats.
That's why.
Congrats on your easy job and lack of activity now for a few weeks.
But in all seriousness, though, it's a reminder how like this should be the moment I feel elation, but various life circumstances can always first of all, maybe my brain and my or my feelings lag behind. Like maybe it hasn't dawned on me, but also things like I haven't got my license plates switched from my previous state to this state.
Who
And
cares?
so
It's probably cheaper to not do it anyway.
I've told myself I was going to do it like immediately the first day of summer vacation, so that would be tomorrow. And it's like I know I'm going to go in there and they're going to tell me I did something wrong because I can't find the title exactly, and it's been a nightmare to try and replace the title. So I'm just going to go in and be like, tell me what to do. Like I'm not leaving here until I'll just bring some cuffs or something and be like, it's fine, I'm willing to fill out the form, just tell me which form. I've been on the internet for hours clicking around both states, and you gotta help me here. It's why I'm here. Yeah.
I hate all of that.
So happy summer to me.
Yeah, happy summer. I hate all of that stuff. DMV nonsense, licensing crap. Like, it's so.
I think a lot of adults, educated adults that have their lives together, like have some of the adulting stuff in disarray, and that could even be. I mean, I would lump saving for retirement. Well, not saving. Like the sentiment of saving is not some mysterious thing, but like health insurance and retirement, DMV shenanigans, like all this stuff is fairly confusing, and you fill out so many forms and they ask you to recount so many things that you either don't have with you, and you don't even know how to access, and I just get frustrated by it all.
Yeah, well, no one teaches you that stuff. I mean, hopefully your parents do, maybe. Otherwise, you just have to like search on the internet for instructions.
And they're so poorly written too.
Well,
I
and
find like DMV's descriptions of what forms you need. I mean, mine should not be that difficult. I'm new to the state and I need a license plate and whatever stickers you need me to pay for.
well, North Carolina, I know has some really dumb DMV rules because if you recall, when I moved out of North Carolina, they have a rule where you're supposed to take your car tag and turn it into them. You don't get to keep your car tag, which I think is stupid because, well, firstly, I paid hundreds of dollars
For the tag,
for essentially for this meaningless metal plate to slap on my car. So
to identify your car.
right,
Yeah.
and like I have my car tags from all the previous states I lived in, and I kind of like having them. So I had no intention.
Yeah.
I had no intention of turning my tag back in. And so you have to do this, fill out a form for lost plates or missing
I wonder if
plates
Florida
or
has
whatever.
that. I doubt it.
No.
Florida doesn't.
I lived in
okay.
Florida previously and did not. You don't have to turn your tag in to Florida. At least
I
at that time you didn't.
had a colleague who lived in North Carolina, moved out for like 10 years, comes back and tries to get a tag, and he had never returned his tag, and they were like,
Yeah.
that he owed a bunch of money and had some like fines and things, basically.
Yeah.
Somehow they and that's why they do it, I would assume,
Yeah.
is these rare little money grubbing moments.
Yeah, I hate that kind of.
Aren't so rare in mass, I suppose.
I hate that kind of
people
stuff.
leaving them.
Freaking North
Yeah.
Carolina.
It's
jerks.
unreasonable. You've moved and they want you to return the tag because what? They want it so badly.
Right, well, that's
do you
the
think
thing,
they
like,
get it and they go, "Thank you.
Yeah,
Let
what-
me recycle it."
What's the intended path there? Like, let's say you're doing like I did, and you're moving to a state far away, and okay, so you're supposed to turn in the tag before
Like
you
when?
move. Okay, so now you drive across the country without you can't
Without a
you
tag.
can't have registered it in your destination state yet. So you're just supposed to drive without any sort of that doesn't work that way.
Or they're like, no, keep the tag, but just mail it to us.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what? What? Okay, so when I'm moving and I'm getting my furniture straightened and I'm trying to get my internet turned on, I'm supposed to mail
my
you
car
my tag.
What are you gonna do with
Yeah.
it? What are you gonna do with it,
Yeah.
in North Carolina? Are you gonna take it and smelt it down and make the next car tag with it? You're gonna like file it away in the file drawer. Oh yeah, Bennett moved out of our state. We'll keep this for our records. No, you're gonna take it out of the mailbox and throw it directly in the garbage. That's what you're gonna do with
Yeah.
it.
And you know they are.
Yeah.
And you know that they just check a box that, dang it, he followed the rules. We can't
we
get
can't
him on
fine
it.
him
They
if he
might
ever
not
comes
check
back.
that half the time anyway. Can't you imagine actually going through the trouble and then them just saying, "Oh, we never received it."
Well, the ridiculous thing,
It's like,
the
okay.
ridiculous thing is that when I left, I still had like 6 months left on my registration, and if you read the registration page or card or whatever, it says if you leave the state before your registration is up, you can get refunded for the difference. So I did that. I called them and I found whatever form I had to fill out. I filled it out and they refunded me like, $170 or whatever it was for the unused registration time. And meanwhile, through
Nice.
some separate branch of bureaucratic crap, like the tag office, they were hounding me. We haven't, we were notified that you registered in another state. We haven't received your car tag, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I filled out the lost tag form and sent it in. And I had to follow up with them like every week for like 4 or 5 weeks to make sure that they processed this form and weren't trying to like block my purchase of insurance in my new state. So it was actually a real headache to deal with for a while. North Carolina
is a real
sucks,
headache.
and people who live there also suck. Not really. I actually don't. I kind of liked North Carolina. Mildly positive overall.
I'm just prepared to walk in and them say, no, this isn't gonna cut it. I mean, I got the driver's license somehow, and that was a pain.
Yeah, you
but
don't have
we'll
to have a
just see
car.
about this.
You don't have to have a car to have a driver's license, so you wouldn't have needed your title. But to register your car, you
But
have to have
something
a car.
weird happened where Danielle didn't have the insurance the over here in North Carolina, and so they like blocked her from getting a license, if I'm not mistaken. There was some sort of blocking going on with her dealing with her car, which doesn't make sense now that you
It's probably
say
because
it that way.
she's a car thief, right? She stole that
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
So I don't think they let you.
No, there
get
was something to
licenses.
do. I thought with the insurance, and I remember like scrambling because I had to bring in proof of insurance of my car and show it. And so I just don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to think about it. I'll deal with that tomorrow. That's a tomorrow Daniel problem.
That's a summer Daniel problem.
Yeah.
Today you're still
Today's a work
today's
day.
a work day, so it's too much to think about and to deal with on that.
Yeah.
That's really nice though to have the whole summer ahead of you. Like that's one thing that I kind of miss, being a student is that you always have something pretty significant to look forward to in the year. Looking forward to summer break is it really really divides up the year. When you're just a normal hardworking American, working a normal hardworking full schedule, you don't have any big break to look forward to. Yeah, you have your Christmas holidays, but usually you only get a couple of holidays in that period, and so it just becomes kind of a year-long monotony. So yeah, I'm a little jealous of you, at least until the robots take your job.
I think having having distinguished beginning and ends to a school year, it really like I've just finished year 11 in education as head teacher. I guess if you were counting all my years of getting a degree and all that's different, but I just really like each year has a distinguished flavor. And also, if you have a class you struggle with, it's like okay, it's only for a year. It's just clear ends in sight is I think a health and beginnings is just healthy. Whether it's planning vacations, like they say, the anticipation and renewed interest, like getting a break from your job to come back in and try something new. If it was just like kind of a never-ending process, when do you get a moment to pause and go, you know what, I'm going to change direction this year? Like you get to do that as a teacher. Oh yeah, next year I'm going to implement this program. It's a little too late this year, and you can start to think about it over the summer and work on it and tinker with your curriculum. So that's fun.
Yeah. I have a different topic that I want to discuss with you.
Good.
I think we have talked about it a little bit before, but not much. And that topic is fear.
Ooh.
The emotion of fear.
Ah.
Is it an emotion? I guess it is, right?
Fear.
The
I would think so.
sensation
Yeah,
of
like
fear,
anger
the
and
response,
anxiety and
physical response of fear.
frustration. All these are fear. Fear is an emotion, I would think.
Do you have any fears? And I guess we probably need to, at least through the course of the conversation, try to hone in on what that means, because people talk about phobias pretty commonly, and is that fear?
Yeah, I would think so. Oh, but it's interesting to say, do I experience fear? Certainly, yes, 100%. And do I have fears? That feels very different.
I know, right? So that's why we're using the same word, but do we mean something different?
Well, to say I have a fear of fill in the blank, I'm giving some power over to whatever it is. It means that I have a narrative in my head that is one of my beasts, and if I'm saying I have a fear of death, now when the subject of death comes up, I'm like, oh, here comes
that's the thing
my fear, my enemy, that thing. Yeah. Like I'm setting myself up to be triggered in that regard, right? Like I'm giving it this power over me, I suppose. Whereas just experiencing fear, if you are honestly scared and you're just labeling it, that's something that causes fear, that seems healthy, but I do think it's a two-way street. I think it starts to, if that becomes part of your identity, lending itself like, oh, that freaks me out. That really, and I have a brief little anecdote of perhaps even being conditioned to be fearful of something, and that is spiders. Remember our childhood friend Rick. Rick was popular, and I saw him as an aspirationally socially positioned within the grade. Girls liked him. He was cool. This would have been probably 4th grade or so, maybe even 3rd. And I was friends with him, but I think he just had a lot more cool capital. And one thing I noticed about Rick was that he was terrified of spiders and would almost, almost performative, yeah, and the girls would laugh, and he'd get attention that I saw as like positive. And spiders are pretty creepy. I mean, even if you're not fearful of them, you look at them and you can see why people go, ugh, that's not my thing. And I certainly don't want to handle spiders. I don't have any desire to have them as pets. They are creepy, crawly little critters, and so I sort of adopted that. Like, I agreed with him. I was an agreeable personality type, and I would be scared. I'd be fearful of spiders and kind of make a show of it. But if I'm being honest, like, then it started to become unclear. Was I actually growing in fear of spiders? Like, now that that's my thing, is to get up and run around and go, woohoo, no, like that. And like, at what point does the performance become the self?
Right.
And so I do think, because it's weird when you say, do I have fears? Well, I don't want my loved ones to die. Death is scary for sure. Like that is, it's unknown. But I don't have things that, like, and I don't like cockroaches or spiders.
So,
but
all right. So how do you behave if you're sitting on the couch and you look over at the wall and there's a spider on the wall? What is your reaction?
Are people with me?
No one is with you. It's just you alone.
I just kind of have this, damn it, I have to take care of this.
Okay, and what do you do?
And I go get probably too many paper towels, like probably triple what you think you need. Like, take whatever you think is appropriate and triple it.
Yeah, just so those fangs, the spider fangs, don't penetrate all the way through the
I don't want
paper towels.
I don't want to feel anything but paper towels as I squash them, or I don't want to feel any like legs move. No, I want a hilarious amount of paper towels between me and the thing.
Okay. But you grab the
whether,
paper towels, you approach the spider with the bundle, and you smush it.
Yeah, or a flip flop, I guess. But I have paper towels ready. I have some sort of. And I would say that I am tentative, maybe more than the average person. Like, you might chuckle watching me as I am, like, studying it, probably from a little bit too further away than you would. A good, like, wherever you would stand, I'm like 4 feet back from that. I'm looking, I'm seeing, is it standing perfectly still? How is it going to respond when I get get a foot closer? So I'm going to take probably double the time you would, but I don't want to linger too much. So and then I just take care of it. I just do it.
Okay. And so, all right, now what happens if you're walking down a nice trail, wooded trail, and you feel that you run into like a spider web? How do you respond at that point?
like that.
Like what?
I really don't like it, and I would make it the immediate thing I'm addressing. So I would make sure to get all the cobweb off of me, and then have a partner or someone around me inspect me
to see if
as
the spider is on
inspecting
you.
myself, if the spider is on me. Yeah. And I might even have sort of a phantom spider feeling for the next 15 minutes of like, is that it? Is that something? As my arm hair maybe gets nudged by or whatever,
Right.
So,
so it sounds like, I mean, all of this though sounds pretty within the normal bounds of fear. Like, I would hesitate to call it arachnophobia.
Oh, for sure. I'm not. I just can tell you, it's not. The fact that I just take care of the spider. I mean, I think arachnophobia would be like, you leave the apartment if there's a spider, or you get all silly.
Arachnophobia.
Crying about it.
Arachnophobia seems like a really unfortunate phobia to have. If it truly is an irrational panic response to spiders, because there's some like pop science factoid that may or may not be true. That's like, no matter where unless you're like in the Arctic Circle or in Antarctica, there's a spider there is at least one spider within 20 feet of you at all times because they're just so ubiquitous. And so like having arachnophobia would be, if you learn that factoid, then you're just kind of like, well, there's no escape. Also, on the topic of arachnophobia, I don't know if you're aware of this, in the video game sphere, it's become increasingly common to include in the settings an arachnophobia mode that turns off spiders in video games. Spiders.
No.
Yeah, spiders are a pretty long-standing.
It's a trope in video games.
It's a trope
everywhere. It's a bad. guy,
especially in like RPGs, you have your giant spiders in the dungeons and all that stuff. But because people are so
off-put or sensitive.
sensitive.
Soft.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to think of the most polite way to phrase it.
Yeah. Weak.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, there's now a toggle pretty often so people can turn off the spiders in video
Spiders
games.
specifically?
Spiders specifically,
I mean,
yeah.
That is, I did not know that, and I find that I just don't know where that's going to lead. I mean, how many, you're going to have a talk, like go to your trigger page and have 70 things on there, and it's like, I don't like, there's one with like people don't like holes in things.
Yeah, trypophobia.
Yeah. So that's funny that you knew that.
Yeah,
but
because that's one that I like to. A lot of people don't know that one, but a lot of people actually they're made very uncomfortable by those trypophobia pictures of. They're like photoshopped hands with holes in them and everything.
Yeah. People, they are I get it. It does tap into something. I when I see that, I go, that's disturbing. But I think but I don't get. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying when I'm saying I have a visceral reaction. What I mean is there's some sympathy in me that like to someone that's, if they were to wig out, I would feel like why are you wigging out? I don't get that extreme. I find this slightly unnerving, and I recognize that there's something unnerving in it, but I don't get the
the intensity of the reaction. That's kind of my response too. Like I wouldn't say necessarily that I have any phobias. In the same way that you dislike spiders, I dislike bees and wasps, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Flying,
Yeah.
buzzing, stinging insects. That's called melissophobia, by the way. What a strange name.
Melissophobia.
Melissophobia, yeah. Don't know who
Melissa's
I guess
out there.
Melissa was the inventor of the bee. But yeah,
Danielle has a similar. Like I can picture you and her. If we walk by and you hear some buzzing,
I'm ducking and dodging.
Similarly, like yeah. You're like, and you go into sort of a panic. I theorize that these wasps, hornets, all of them, right? They respond. Like dogs have this sixth sense about fear, and so people who fear dogs have a tough time with dogs because the dog gets worked up.
That's
and a little
cynophobia,
frustrated.
by the way, or cynophobia.
It's what?
Cynophobia or cynophobia. Yeah.
So I think wasps and things respond similarly. They just see the movement and sense some form of anxiety. I have no idea.
I don't think that's true.
Seems to be it just seems attracted to those people freaking out, And I have found that if I just walk calmly or just be like, I want to, because who doesn't want out of a situation where they're hearing hornets fly overhead or nearby? Like we all do. But just to continue walking swiftly, purposefully, and without like any jerking, I feel like it follows Danielle and does not follow me.
I don't think that's true. I agree that you can assert your willpower and not move around. For bees and wasps and stuff, I don't. Like if you have like Tyrannosaurus rexophobia or whatever, that makes sense because you're not supposed to run because they see movement, right? According to the scientific film Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And so, if you have Tyrannosaurus rexophobia and you panic, that would be a really bad thing. Whereas if you're kind of stoic and you stand there and you master your fear, then that's a good thing. But with wasps and bees, like I don't think they don't like key off of your movement. In fact, if you're like threatening their hive or their nest or their food or whatever it is, then it seems like their purpose would be to get you to leave, and so they would want you to move and get away. And also think about too,
involves movement. I don't know.
Think about too, like when bees or wasps or horseflies or whatever start bothering a horse, they flip their tail around, dramatically and try to swat the bugs away. And that's the same kind of, that's how I see what I do, right? If a bee buzzes by my ear, I kind of throw my hands up real quick. I don't like go, ah! and run off and get scared. I just kind of throw my hands up to try to scare it away. Like, stop buzzing around me, go buzz somewhere else. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Actually, I have an anecdote from just the other day. I went on a really long hike. I have two fear-related anecdotes that I can discuss from this hike. The first is about bees or wasps. I don't know what it was. I didn't investigate. Maybe horseflies or something. Anyway, loud buzzing bug, and they're just you're out in the wilderness, and there are wildflowers all around and everything, and so there are obviously a lot of bugs, and they just buzz around you. You're constantly hearing that hum of a bug flying
That's not fun.
somewhere within a few feet of you. And like the first time it happens, I give my normal response, like wave my hands around a little bit, like, get away, don't bother me. Like, I'm not even looking for the specific bug. I'm just like, okay, get away, just don't land on me, just go away. But after that persists for like minutes constantly while you're walking, there's just nothing you can do. Like, it's just ever present. It doesn't make sense to wave your hands around anymore. Just ignore it as best you can and keep going. And that's what I did. And I didn't get stung or bit or whatever, and I also didn't run off in fear and dive into the lake to escape the buzzing. So, like, I think I'm kind of in the same place as you are with your mild arachnophobia, with my melissophobia.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is we could both safely say that I think we're just within the realm of being like maybe slightly fearful, but not. I mean, phobia. We're way away from that.
Well,
we just have a preference, like a pretty strong preference of not liking something.
Here's another anecdote, and maybe this will help us kind of distinguish between fear and some other sensations or emotions. So another thing that happened on my long hike is, I hiked this really long distance, and there was a location at the end that I wanted to visit, and so, but it was further than I had planned on hiking, but I decided to do it anyway. So I kept walking, and as I was walking down the trail, excited to see somewhere new and unknown, a very large moose walked out within close enough a distance where it was like, okay, this is a little too close to be to a moose. Because
they're bad mofos, aren't they? I mean, they kill people. They're angry. I hear things like the meanest animals are like hippos and meese or whatever.
Yeah, they'll charge you. You're not supposed to like get out and pet them, or they're not friendly animals. And so this was a female moose. It wasn't a male. It didn't have the big antlers. But anyway, it was huge, right? They're bigger than horses are, and I was like, okay, like I immediately was like, okay, time to stop and turn around. It's like I just didn't even consider continuing to walk the trail nearer to the moose. And so was that response a fear response? Like, was that do I have undiagnosed moosophobia?
I mean, obviously, I don't think having a fear an appropriate reaction, which I would say you did, and it was probably the fact that you weren't even your brain made a decision for you, or like fear bypassed the prefrontal cortex and decision making and said, "Hey, I'm taking care of this one. Like, get out."
Yeah.
And you thought my guess is you had a little bit of an adrenaline rush. You thought clearly, and you were decisive, and you just got out of there, which is what I think one of the benefits of fear
I actually didn't have I didn't have that adrenaline sensation that we've talked about before in other situations. It was just a very clear, like, yep, this is this is a dangerous thing that I'm not gonna entertain further, and just it's time for. I was already planning on turning around soon, and this is as good a spot as any. I'm turning around and then look over my shoulder, as I walk away to make sure the moose isn't chasing me.
Right. Well, you recognize the potential for danger, and in that, well, I guess maybe this is a distinct case where, it wasn't like immediate threat, fear, and all the things we're talking about, but it was I need to be on high alert at the very least, right?
So that's what I was going to ask, like, what's the distinction between fear, anxiety, and panic? Are those three things distinct, or are they overlapping in some way?
I think when you're at they're overlapping for sure, and maybe maybe fear is the umbrella term, but I think panic seems easy for me. Panic is when fear has gone to the point that you are debilitated. Your decision making is you've just I don't want to say see red because that's the anger metaphor, but you are not making a decision. And panic, people don't make good decisions while panicked at all. In fact, they either just shut down, sit down, cry, lash out. They revert to some almost childlike form of a tantrum or something like that. That would be, or silence. But
I mean,
they are.
if you looked over on the wall and saw the spider and you started shouting and immediately ran out of your apartment, that would be panic, right?
I guess, mate, in a well, we use things that we might say panic in his eyes and panic. We overuse the term, but I think I'm not even sure that'd be the fight or flight and the flight kicked in, but I would call panic like I back to a corner and I sit down slowly as I'm like going like that's just.
I mean, that's
struck
panic
with
too.
panic.
I think
That is
I agree
panic.
that
I guess.
that's
I
also
guess. I
panic.
guess running out is in a fit of panic. You could run out of the room, but that is also that had utility in it.
So
I wanted to say that panic was beyond utility. It's just like
To me, it seems like panic is when your fear or anxiety pushes you into action, irrational action. I would say that's when it becomes panic.
Okay. We can say irrational action, and those irrational actions can still be
Yeah, they can
useful.
They can.
If you're a if you're a jet plane operator, a jet fighter, and you're going down and you're panicking and you're trying to pull up.
I think they
pull
call
up,
those
pull
guys
up, you know.
planers. I think that's what they're
Planers.
called.
So you can imagine though, like you are panicking and you might still either click eject or you're trying to pull up and you're just operating on autopilot, I guess, because you're bypassing. You're just like going safety, safe,
Autoplaner.
whatever the safest thing. And that's where training, by the way, I imagine, like
Yeah.
when you're in panic mode, let's make sure you're doing the right things.
Right.
If you're an expert in a situation, that's what training is doing. You almost create muscle memory. And so when you're not thinking intellectually, whatever you just do in that state of panic better be useful. And I think that's what it means to be an expert in some ways. That when people say they could do it in their sleep, you're also saying in a panic-filled state, I'd probably make a decision that was useful, even though I've bypassed logic and that sort of thing.
So how does anxiety fit in?
There's my knee jerk is to say there's an anticipatory nature in it. Like fear is like we are smart people and we can anticipate things not going well, and in that like we know we're tangential to danger, so we can even conjure up danger where it may or may not exist.
Yeah.
So we can live in perpetual fear despite relative safety.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking that too. So it seems like our definitions are pretty. They line up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why these Sunday scaries and things where you're like fearful of the events, because I intellectually know I've lived through a lot of Mondays and they've actually gone well. So intellectually, I have confidence that my day will go well on Monday, but on Sunday night, it's just I've got all this stuff that it's unresolved, and so it is that anticipation. And as soon as the day starts and I put in the work on Sunday necessary to make Monday good, I feel, it relieves, it resolves pretty quickly.
What do you think about this definition of fear? It's a negative response that alters your behavior, or it's the emotion that causes a behavioral response in a negative direction. Let me give some examples.
Okay.
To try to clarify. So like, there are things that you do to you alter your behaviors in order to avoid potential negative future outcomes. For example, you exercise to avoid gaining weight or becoming unhealthy, or you I don't know, things of that nature, right? You put money aside so that you're not in poverty later on, that kind of thing. Is that a fear of getting fat or a fear of being poor? Are those sorts of behaviors, could you classify that as fear?
I think you could. Instead of like you working out to celebrate being in good shape and feel good, or saving money so that you can enjoy your your rewards or your earnings at the end. Um, like it seems like a negative framing, like that we're operating out of. I guess that's why you said negative.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's a
I think
response
it's
to
pretty.
avoid negative outcomes.
I mean, if you had to honestly assess, of a lot of people are on diets or exercise plans to, to help with their health. How many of what percentage of those people are doing it because it makes them feel really good and positive, and how many are doing it because they want to avoid, you know, being fat? Like I think for that particular example, more people are exercising in an avoidant way than
Yeah.
in an enjoy in a positive way.
100%. Like, and then the people with the really great bodies, though, constantly talk about it being a lifestyle or like how good they feel and
Sure,
how
and
it's like
good for them,
work on their men.
and that may even be a fake it till you make it kind of thing that they've they
But what's
psychologically work.
motivating people is they look in the mirror one day and go, "I'm not. This is not acceptable to me."
Yes,
Or
yeah,
oftentimes, right?
right,
And then
right.
they work out to avoid this thing that's making them feel bad. But I guess what's the difference between avoiding a negative outcome, avoiding negatives, and pursuing positives? Like that's the same coin, right? Just different sides of that coin. So
Maybe, but
studying for the test not to fail, or studying for the test to do well on the test. I don't know.
well,
It's like,
as an educator entering into summer, you would be the one to speak to the motivations there. Like what has more utility in the educational context, the carrot or the stick? It seems like the stick does, right? That's the whole, like, the purpose of grading now, it seems to is to discourage inaction or poor behavior rather than to reward good behavior. Would you agree with
um,
that?
I would, except then again, if I look at my high flyers who are meeting with me and they've gotten an A on every paper and they maybe know that, but they still seem fearful of, like, they have hyperbolic, oh, I failed this test and they got a 94 or something, um, these high flyers. But the high flyers are still meeting, knowing they are probably going to do well and pursuing excellence. And so the only reason I note that is it's just like the people who work out regularly talking about how good it is, how it makes them feel. It seems that the people really successful in an area are not, or have transitioned beyond fear of failure, and or feel fear, and then gone into a more positive, like, pursuit of excellence.
Right.
But you're right that, like, maybe they never would have tried, and clearly you have your C students or your D students just, at that point, fear of failure is motivating them to meet with the teacher or try to follow directions and read closely and that sort of thing. So unfortunately, the stick,
Well,
grades are the stick,
yeah, I mean, obviously there are differences in personality to how people respond. I mean, there's a whole area of personality psychology discussing how people respond to negative emotion. Some people are more neurotic and anxious, and some people are less neurotic and anxious, in how they respond to negative emotion. And I think fear and anxiety would definitely fall under that umbrella. So maybe that explains the difference. And some people are more likely to be like, oh, this workout feels great. Oh, I love eating this protein powder. And some people are like, oh, I'm looking pretty sloppy today in the mirror. Gosh, I guess I can only eat lettuce. You know, and those are kind of the two poles of this thing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if this is an idea I want to entertain because it might be too off subject for fear. Let me know. But there seems to be a relationship between things that are good for you are sort of boring and slow. Like, you do one workout, you don't go from fat to not fat. In fact, it's not that exciting. Doesn't even feel that good, especially initially. But it's like slow and deliberate workouts over time. Same with eating, right? Like, these habits that are good for you are slow and not sexy,
Yeah.
and they're good for you. And then the converse is completely true, that, like, a delicious, crappy fast food meal that is bad for you. So, like, the immediate pleasure and the long term misfortune, of unsustainable things, or getting drunk or something like that. Although obviously some people don't like getting drunk, but clearly like a lot of people do, and yet it's not good for you in the long run. So I was just thinking, I want to tie that to fear, if that's possible, and say, like, is there something to be said for what we're saying is like people that, if you live your life avoiding or motivated by fear, fear is your primary goal to get you to do things. You might be at the bottom. You might be the bad student or the fat person looking in the mirror, instead of the person pursuing excellence in a field. So you want to kind of do a self-check and make sure that fear is not your primary motivator in life, or else that's a suggestion that maybe you're just struggling to keep up with life and you're just not being that successful. And then that's a weird thought. So those that are not doing that well in life are just perpetually fearful, which is psychologically taxing and tiring and grating, and it's just this self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's like, I'm just anxious and not good at things.
Yeah, maybe. I could definitely see a link, when you talk about how a lot of positive progress in life is incremental, and fear is not a good incremental encouragement, right? Because it's kind of, at least the way I envision it, it's kind of sporadic, and it's only when you start thinking about something do you become fearful, and otherwise you just try to sweep it under the rug and not think about what you're afraid of. Whereas if you're positively motivated and you have a goal, then that's on your mind more, and you're constantly taking steps toward it. And that constant nature of progress, setting a goal and working towards it, that jives really well with the idea of incremental improvement, which is how people experience positive benefits. So I see that. I see some link there.
Is fear like the caffeine, like a boost, an energy drink, a P90X or something like that?
Could be.
It is a good motivator. You will think clearly. I've even heard that fear can temporarily give you an immune boost. It's just like, and it's an immediate motivator. Fear, particularly, you're in danger. Get out of this.
Yeah.
But there's no substitute if you're like tired. The key is to get a good sleep, and that means regulating your circadian rhythm and doing this over time, which is, again, not sexy, not flashy, not fun. It requires discipline, and it's just going to have that payoff. Whereas the analogy of fear being the caffeine boost to the I'm awake, but it's no long-term solution just to drink energy drinks.
Let me ask you another, to categorize another thing. So we've talked before about those times when your body betrays you, and you get that adrenaline rush, and your palms start sweating, and you stumble over your words. Would it be fair to say that if you have an involuntary nervous response like that to something, that you're afraid of it?
Yes, is my knee jerk. I keep saying knee jerk, but that's what I want to say is yes. Or you're hyper. My experience, when I say my body betrays me, what I mean is that I have these thoughts. I am a reasonable guy, and yet I might not be able to articulate those thoughts because I'm having this adrenaline rush, and I'm recognizing that I am in the position. It's do or die time. It is go time. Like, go, perform. Here it is. Be careful, though, because the stakes are high, because it always coincides with the high stakes moment. Not typically a good faith interaction, but usually a bad faith interaction, or potentially public speaking or something like that. And when it's a bad faith interaction, you don't get do-overs. What you do next will either escalate or de-escalate. Those seem to be the two. And how offended are you, and how willing are you to escalate, and should you escalate? And when you're not thinking clearly, when that adrenaline rush is sort of bypassing your calmness and your intellect, it sounds like fear is starting to take over, or something. I don't know. Fear might not be the right word, but that it's, again, it hits all the definitions we've talked about. It's a recognition of the importance of the situation and the potential danger in it. If you're angry, there's some sense of injustice that has occurred potentially, and that maybe you should push this issue. And if you're angry and you're heated emotionally, your calculation is screwed up, right? Maybe you faced some disappointment or some shame or something that made you angry, and you're and by the way, my personal philosophy is if I'm feeling that emotional, I tend to want to just not do anything and say anything. But that doesn't mean you can go around never responding or going silent if someone's asking you a question and going, "What? Answer me, answer me." Like you have, this is like a response that is demanded of you. So, like for instance, or the opposite would be like something happens that you don't like. Like I had something today I talked with you before the podcast that I'm frustrated by, and I want to say something, but I'm also mad. And so if I say something while I'm mad, that seems like a bad recipe because again, I recognize that I'm not emotionally or I'm not soberly calculating things. So what I do is I just say I'm not going to write any emails or make any phone calls or send any texts for a couple of days until I'm cool on it, and then I can soberly reflect. But is that fear, that like that adrenaline? Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was having trouble slotting this in neatly because, like despite being sometimes provocative with the things I say, I actually don't enjoy confrontation with people. Especially like when you say it's a bad faith confrontation. I don't enjoy that at all. Like if there's someone I genuinely don't like and they genuinely don't like me and we're having an argument, I don't enjoy that situation. And that situation,
I don't think anyone well-adjusted does. By the way, I think you might even get a thrill out of intellectually sparring, but
sure.
If things start to get really heated, or you recognize you might be jeopardizing something relationally, or they're already in a bad relationship, then you wouldn't even want to intellectually spar with them unless I can really show them up. There's that temptation, a little lesser part of our nature though, like it's a little immature, like you're going to show them up. But then you recognize, once it's gone beyond that, like now we're kind of devolving to insults or something. That is, that, I don't see where there's any joy in bad faith conversation unless you are. I just don't think well-adjusted people. There are well-adjusted people that enjoy that. I mean, I think there are people that say they're willing to go in and like they'll debate people all the time, but these are like maybe joyless people or something isn't quite right. They're getting their joy, but it's from bad energy. And
I could see
that sounds hippie of me, but bad energy.
Well, yeah, that part does
the
sound
definition.
hippie.
Saying bad energy, but what I'm saying is recognizing the bad faith conversation and the danger involved with that, the ill will that's floating about.
Their aura. I could see someone enjoying engaging in a conversation like that with an audience, so that they can essentially put the other person's bad faith on display. But again, I don't know that that's something that you necessarily enjoy so much.
Yeah, but that's when you're like, okay, a political commentator goes on a big news show in order to not actually address the person they're disagreeing with, but to address the audience. That's a different.
Yeah, that's different. It's a little different.
But that's true. Like in a classroom, a conversation, I have to remind myself that it's not just between me and the student, or even the students conversing with each other. It's like it's the audience there, so that it's definitely an additional layer of motivation. But fear, I guess fear is like if I got some news I didn't want to hear professionally, or like a disappointment or something like that, I can easily call that fear because it would mean, oh, I thought I had a particular standing within an institution.
Yeah, what if, for example, you got an email and it said, Daniel, we've gotten a complaint about your workplace behavior, and it was, we heard via student channels that you said something inappropriate. You said this particular phrase, and we need to have a talk about this. Would that cause you to have this sort of what we're saying as a fear reaction? Let's say, in fact, that the phrase you said, there was additional context around it that made it not, you could justify it as not being inappropriate. Like would the threat of confrontation, like maybe they're setting up a conference with the parents of the students or something, would that sort of situation cause you to have this sort of physiological adrenaline response?
Yes, it would. And I think fear is the right word for it. I mean, I might use words like, oh, I'm frustrated, I feel misunderstood, I'm so eager to clarify things immediately, but I know now that like there's a lot of parties involved and it's going to have to, like, it takes time to whether it's to get us all into a room or not. And that anticipation would create the anxiety, like I want to clarify everything now because it feels like it could be the simple solution if I could just, and I'd also be like, well, why, man, this is when good faith goes a long way, like the presumption of goodwill and like establishing good relationships. And like, presumably in this situation, like a student would have misinterpreted or taken out of context, but I'd be hurt, mad, frustrated about why, given our relationship, how could they possibly interpret it in this manner? That makes me sad. But that's a longer work to get into. Hey, and then I have to calm down and go, well, can I understand why they got there? Like, were they frustrated with something? Like, what are all the elements here? But yes, this sense of overwhelm in that moment of potential reputational cost, and having to go explain myself, and all the uncertainty that even if I feel confident I can explain myself well, it's just the way I view things is dang it, that kind of like took some capital from you. And even if you don't have another incident, so I hate when something like that happens. If something like that happens, that it could, you're kind of low on capital right now, so you just need to tread lightly for a while, even if it was totally explained and went away. It's just you're low. Sorry that it takes a while to fill that back up.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly being accused of things like that, it starts to feel true even if it's not. So
yeah, I mean, I think even if it's not true, it can influence your reputation. I mean, I think we've seen that socially. People who are saddled with a lot of spurious accusations tend to get tarnished, even if the accusations are never proven, or if they're proven false later.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fear of missing out, FOMO? How does that rank in? Is that a legitimate fear in the same way that we've been talking about things?
Well, for instance, David is notorious for having a lot of FOMO. So he will do things that will make him physically miserable, like get less sleep, or even spend money for a last minute flight, or like he'll do things that are just not on paper very wise, nor are they comfortable, nor do they make a lot of sense in any other context other than this group of friends is hanging out, or this thing he really wants is unfolding, and if he doesn't go, he'll be the one left out. And so he's certainly experiencing a strong pull. Is it fear? I mean, we call it literally fear of missing out. Like, and you are motivated by avoiding a negative.
Right.
In that sense, because missing out is the negative, and you're motivated by that missing out, and instead of like, I think it meets all the definitions of fear. It's just that why I don't like it is you should do things based on whether you want to do them or whether it's feasible. So I do experience, like it's natural if your great group of friends is going on a trip that you would want to go to, and you not going, and the trip continues, you're missing out.
Right.
And if you're confident in your friendships, if you're a secure person, you're not worried about, oh my God, they're gonna talk about me, or oh, they're gonna start a cool inside joke, and I will not be a part of that, and I might get left behind. That's insecurity, straight up.
Right.
But let's say you're adjusted well, and you have faith in your friendships, and you're not worried about that. You're just purely like, they're gonna like eat some cheeseburgers and go to some games and do some fun things, and I've wanted to be with them and laugh, and that's still a legitimate. If you make an unwise financial decision or a difficult choice that you would not otherwise, like it.
I mean, I think it's perfectly natural to want to participate in that sort of thing. It seems like the healthy response is, well, I'm really glad my friends are getting to, hang out with each other. Like, you want good things and good times for your friends. And so if you don't get to go, yeah, you wish you could be there, but you would rather not be able to go and the event still happen than the event not happen at all.
Yes. If you feel like you'd rather the event not happen at all, I'd say that you need to examine yourself and say there's something out of balance and there's some insecurity on your behalf, like that you need to reflect on. I really would.
See,
because that's just kind of cruel, even.
Yeah,
I would say, like, either I can have fun or no one can, kind of thing. It's like, what's wrong with you?
There's a quote by H.P. Lovecraft. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown. Does that kind of seems to capture a lot of what we've been talking about, even talking about the fear of missing out in this context. Like, what are you afraid of? You're afraid of the essentially the unknown things that will happen in your absence, the unknown future that could have been if you were there enjoying this fun time with your friends. Like, you'll never know how fun it could have been were you there. It seems
the email situation that I'm being, like, even if I can explain myself well, there's still uncertainty and unknown about what damage does this have on your reputation. Will people actually listen to you and be convinced? Tons of unknowns.
Right.
So it is
the spider. What if it bites you? Is it going to hurt? Are you going to be allergic?
How will I react?
Right.
Yeah. Is it poisonous? Black widow, this and that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the moose, going to charge me or?
Because I would not say that you're fearful of, like, stubbing your toe, because it's just like, well, I don't walk around fearful of that. Even if I stubbed my toe recently and I notice that corner juts out, first of all, I'll either amend the corner, like adjust the furniture accordingly, or I'll just be more conscious about that's a potential hazard. But I don't feel what I would call fear, because it's a no. I know what having your toe stubbed. I know I can avoid it. It feels too within your control to have unknown factors. Like, the only unknown is, what if I'm really tired and I'm not concentrating on my bodily awareness and I stub my toe. But that's that's a pretty low unknown threshold. So I'm no longer fearful. So yeah, it is fear of unknown. There's nothing to fear but fear itself, kind of thing. It's like the idea of the unknown is what motivates fear.
That was the one other quote I had to potentially discuss. There's nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's so famous. I just threw it in there. Like, well, if you want to stop and think about that, like, well, first of all, I kind of just think, no, it's a good thought experiment, and it's a useful quote to think about. It's like, yeah, fear consumes us, and that's the worst thing. That's the thing we should be afraid of more than whatever it is.
Yeah.
But go ahead and be scared of bees and wasps, Bennett. Like, you probably should be, because they can sting you. I should probably be scared of spiders a little bit, or a moose that could charge at you. So those are worth being scared of and fearful of. But fear is probably the most damning thing on us psychologically.
Fear's the mind killer. That's a quote from Dune.
That's a good quote.
When I think about the FDR quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. To me, that seems like practical advice to essentially not panic. Like, the fear is what you should be afraid of. Like, the control it has over you, the irrationality that it can make you experience. That's what it seems like the warning is against. Like, yeah, it's fine to have a rational aversion to spiders or musai or whatever, but it's when you start taking irrational action and that fear controls you, that's when it becomes worthy of being afraid of.
My parents had a lot of explicit discussions, now that I think of it this way, about fear. And they said, there are a lot of people that are afraid to do things, whether it's ride a roller coaster or even live in another town or even drive on, like, on the highway. Or there's people, you can find someone who's scared of anything. But even if you wanted to protect yourself and never leave your home and, live the smallest, safest life with the least amount of risk, you could get out of your bed, your foot could be asleep, and you could fall and hit your head and die. Like, you can, like, and it's weird how they said that to me as a kid. I'm like, wait, that's kind of a scary thought. But they're like, yeah, life is inherently a little scary. And if you're going to let that fear make you not go out and do things, then that's a problem. And like that, telling me that frequently. Like that was one of the. I mean, every parent's probably told their kids some version of that, but this was one of the. I'm hammering this home. If I was scared to ride a roller coaster and I was like, but can I? Or like, should I? Is it too dangerous? They're like, they would say, just like, remember, you can die slipping on ice, like walking to your car. Like you can die,
Little,
I think what's funny is
little child Daniel living
Yeah.
in Georgia, you could slip on ice walking to your car.
you could slip or whatever. You could just die. There's a million ways to die. Like
Right.
at least do it on a roller coaster. Like that's cool. But it was freeing to me because and maybe this is even better. It sounds like a horrible thing to tell a kid, but if you're a kid and you intellectually acknowledge that you can in fact die walking to your car, but that doesn't actually scare you because you're a kid and you've done it a ton of times and you're like, yeah, I get that I can, but I'm not like it's not something to be scared of is actually the point. Is like it and as a kid, you're not going to be convinced to be scared of it, or at least I wasn't. That wasn't my reaction of, oh my gosh, now when I walk to my car, I'm going to freak out. Like, no, it was like, oh, you're right. Like, that's such a safe thing, and it has risk. So,
I mean, it seems like that parental advice could be dangerous to the wrong kind of person, right? A person
Potentially, yeah.
who is very prone to anxiety, someone very neurotic, could take that as, oh, you're right. I didn't even realize that literally everything can kill me. And that means now I have to be extra careful and aware.
I get what you're saying, but I would like to, like, in the same way that you have to face your demons, it's like if someone is always scared of getting hurt or physically, it's like, look, like, you need to confront the fact, the reality is that you could always be hurt, and you're putting too much energy on areas A and B and C when, like, if you were to try to be logical about this. And by the way, I've heard people like John Green wrote about OCD and said it's not that I'm illogical, it's that I'm hyper-logical. And so what would happen is he'd get this idea, he'd go to Moe's or some and say, I'll have a burrito. And then he'd think, what if they spit in the burrito? And he'd say, that's an irrational thought. But there is you can't prove that they didn't spit in the burrito. And you get into this thought spiral of, even though I know it's really, 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 really unlikely, it's practically zero. But that word practically is dwelling upon me because like it's the word it's not absolute zero. It's not definitively zero. It's practically zero. And then you get hung up on the idea of like, okay, well, if I eat enough burritos, and so he thought spirals.
Yeah.
And so it, again, what he would call hyper rationality, like this fixation on something where, you know.
By the way, spitting,
Yeah.
people, like that's an irrational fear in the first place. People spitting in your food, like it's not dangerous. So like even if someone did spit in your food, so
It's just
what?
kinda gross,
It's gross.
but
Like
yeah.
it's like we psychologically think that it's gross and disgusting, and it is gross and disgusting. But if 100 people spit in your food and you ate the food, you would probably never know, and you would never experience any negative outcome
You
from
wouldn't
it.
even get like a cold. You'd get a cold if they had a cold, probably.
I mean, I doubt it. Probably not. I mean, if you're in the same restaurant that they're breathing in, you know, then you could catch the cold that way just as easily. If you're not going to catch a cold that way, then you're not going to catch it digesting a small amount of their saliva where it gets destroyed in your stomach acid. So, yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of people think about that, like, oh, I better tip well or they're going to spit in my food, or I better not be a jerk or they're going to spit in my food. And I think that's not an appropriate framing of it. Like, we should just not culturally not be afraid of people spitting in our food.
Yeah. But I want those people who spit in the food to treat it as pretty serious thing not to do.
Well, yeah, sure, obviously.
Because if you're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. You're like, you know what? Right. This person was kind of a jerk, so I'm going to spit in their
Right.
food.
We should
versus
we should culturally not be afraid of people spitting in our food, but we should also execute people if they're found to have spit in food.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
the right balance, I think.
That's how I like to live my life in some ways, you know. there's a metaphor there that's like, yeah, like I'm gonna mess up and kind of just treat it as not that big of a deal, but like have really firm barriers about preventing the messing up, you know.
There we go.
That's because Yeah, I mean that's what you should do. Okay, you found out that someone spit in that burrito, you should just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, "Well, I ate it, nothing I can do." But if there's a spit in your burrito or place to eat lunch, you say no. Like I'm not gonna patronize that place.
You're right.
I feel like it's a callback to a joke we made a long time ago. I don't know.
Yeah. That's all I have to talk about on fear.
What one last quote, then we'll
okay.
end.
All right, go for it.
I think Eleanor Roosevelt said, "Do something that scares you every day."
Another Roosevelt quote? Jeez, these people are obsessed with fear.
Obsessed with fear.
Do something that scares you.
Fear itself. Do something that scares you every day.
Every day? I don't think I agree with that.
Again, I think it's one of those, if you take literally, it's like the fear, but fear itself. It's more of an intellectual exercise of like, take some risks, and that's when you learn.
Yeah,
and
sure. Push your boundaries a little bit. Like, don't live a coddled life of too much order. You need a little bit of chaos.
Be willing to be embarrassed or take a risk or whatever.
Sure.
It's like good. You could say something like, I could say something. Good teaching is embarrassing yourself at least once a day. And like if we got literal on it, that's just goofy and not even the point. It's like, really, every day. That's all. So you have to actively find ways to. It's like no. What I mean is be out there, be yourself, and you're gonna embarrass yourself frequently.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, yeah, I understand that. I don't know. Sometimes these quotes, you have to be careful with quotes, right? Because when you hear them out of context, some people may take them literally. And so I don't know. Like if you're gonna attach your name to a quote like that, then why don't you actually say what you mean? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not giving enough credit because maybe it wasn't.
Well, I'm actually just wrestling with the poetic license of it too. I want to say things poetically or in an interesting way, because if you changed, do something that scares you every day to, please take some responsible risks that might advance your way of thinking and perspective on life. I don't know. It might just lose some of the.
I mean, I think that it's no less poetic to say, "Don't live a life of excessive order." I mean, that's plenty poetic, and that doesn't, it's literally acceptable.
You know what? Screw Eleanor Roosevelt. You're right.
I'm not a big fan. I'm not a fan
of a life of excessive order.
I'm not a fan of the Roosevelts anyway, so I'm kind of, when I saw the quote and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that quote. Oh, it's FDR. Oh, that guy.
That guy. No wonder.
Yeah. Figures.
Yeah.
Okay. The end.
The end. Bye.
Do.